Let's cut through the noise. If you are buying in Denver, Metro, or Northern Colorado right now, the opportunity may be where most people may not be where most people are looking. Most buyers are still staring at the list price like that is the whole story, a price tag, and it's simply not. The real opportunity right now is in the structure of the deal. Can the sellers help with closing costs? Absolutely. Can they help buy down the rate? Absolutely. Can they offer an inspection credit? Yes. Can they help with repairs and adjust? Can they adjust the price? Can they preserve more, or can you preserve more of your cash after closing? That's the whole point of a seller concession. That matters because buying a house is not just about getting the keys, it's about being financially stable after you get the keys. And a lot of times we really think about that top price point, and we hear this seller concession and we don't necessarily understand it. The only time a seller concession is equal to a price reduction is in a cash transaction. And here's the stat that should get your attention. Redfin reported that about 46% of US home sales had seller concessions in May of 2026 nationally. Denver, 63.3%. That means Denver buyers are seeing concessions at a much higher rate than the national market. So today we're going to talk about where the opportunity is showing up, where it is not showing up, and how buyers, sellers, move-up buyers, and investors should think about seller credits in today's market. Before we go too deep into this, if you're thinking about moving in or out of Denver or Northern Colorado, call or text me before you start making decisions off of headlines. Because I have a lot of people that are waiting for that interest rate to tick down. They have a number in their head. And the truth is that number probably could be achieved. It's not going to be 3%, but that number could probably be achieved through a seller concession in this market. 63.3% of homes in Denver and the Northern Colorado market got a seller concession. This is the kind of market where the right strategy can matter more than just finding the right listing. So let's talk about this. Let's talk about the opportunity. Most buyers think negotiation means one thing. Can I get the seller to drop the price? That is one tool. It's not the only tool, and oftentimes it's not the most beneficial. A price reduction, the seller lowers the list price or the contract price, right? And that's a key point, because if the seller has the home listed a little above value, which if you watch my channel, sellers are still kind of caught in this, like, oh, I saw that big number at some point, and I just want to get that. So a lot of homes are coming on the market a little bit or a lot bit overpriced. This can help the monthly payment just a little bit, right? If you lower the price, say $10,000, it's listed at 700,000. You make an offer for 680. They counter 690. You've just lowered the price based on their asking price, $10,000. Well, that spread out over 360 payments isn't very much more money per month in your pocket. So this is something that's absolutely key. It's easy to understand because everyone sees the lower number and it's there. But a seller concession is something totally different. The seller contributes towards the buyer's cost of purchasing the home. It can go towards closing costs, prepaid taxes, and insurance. We both know that those are super high. If you're in the Denver metro area and you didn't watch my video, head over to my YouTube channel, My High Market Mastery, and watch that. But it can also go towards inspection credits, repair credits, mortgage rate buydowns, and certain lender approved costs. So that's the thing. It cannot go towards your, down payment. And that's what a lot of people think, seller concessions and so on. We'll talk a little bit about that as we do often on the seller side. But it cannot go towards your down payment. It's just the cost to purchase a home as far as a concession goes when a loan is involved. And so those things are where it can go to. So a price cut changes the headline. A concession can change the buyer's cash position. And that is a huge deal. As a $10,000 price reduction might only move the monthly payment modestly, a $10,000 seller credit to help cover their closing costs, down payment, and interest rate will leave the buyer with more cash after closing because now they don't have to bring that cash to closing in addition to their down payment. And in a market where rates are still, you know, sixes, sevens that are thrown around, that cash position matters because that monthly payment is serious. And having that cash on hand for when the house that you just bought breaks could be a game changer. So we don't need to get into mortgage rates and exactly what they are. However, usually see like in the average price points, $10,000 to $15,000 of prepaids that can go towards, you know, a concession on a traditional straight across deal that has a loan involved. So now if we can increase that rate buy down, right? If we can go up to $25,000 or $30,000 of a concession, build that into the offer, however you want to do it, and go from there. I will tell you that if you are lowering the price and lowering the concession, that net to the seller is going to be pretty aggressive to look at. Say you had a $15,000 price reduction and a $15,000 concession. That's going to be $30,000. Maybe they agree to it, but in some loan types, depending on your down payment and whatever, you can definitely get that $30,000 to go towards buying the rate down permanently if you're not one of those people that's willing to risk in the market. And your prepaids, putting $30,000 of cash that you would have had to spend to get in that rate into your pocket. So how cheap can I get the house? The better question is, what structure improves my position the most? And we're going to dive into some national and Denver stats here. So stay with me. I know this isn't everybody's favorite part, but the big number, 46.2% of homes in the US had concessions in May. 63.3% of Denver sales had concessions. Denver buyers are seeing concessions at a much higher rate than the national trend, as we've talked about. So concessions have trended up from 43.1% 1 year earlier, up 1.5 percentage points year over year. This is not rare deal making. It is showing up in closing sales. Concession price drop plus price drop, 15.7% of US homes had both a concession and a price drop. Denver specific combos not listed in Redfin's table, some sellers are using more than one tool to get the deals done. Price reductions, 18.1%, 0.8% of active listings had price cuts. 29% of Denver listings had price cuts. So that means that Denver is obviously, you know, it's up there. Denver had the highest price cut share among the 50 largest metros, meaning that we're a little bit behind the trends, right? Sellers are still holding on to that pretty view or everything that's going on. And so I want you to understand that the median list price, 430,000, down 2.5% year over year. 589,000 on average, down 3.4% year over year. So Denver's list price adjustment is sharper than the national average. Active listings are up nationally. 1,102,615 is up 1.9% year over year, where Denver's active listings is up 4.9% year over year, according to Realtor.com. So Denver still has opportunity, but not because every segment is flooded with supply. Days on market median, 53 days. Denver days on market up 3 days year over year. DMAR, which is our realtor board that puts out the stats for the 11 county metro area, shows detached average days on market was at 14 and attached was at 34. Okay, so those condos and townhomes are definitely sitting. A lot of that's due to the increased HOAs, which is largely based on the insurance costs and premiums going up. So local opportunity depends heavily on property type and condition. Redfin defines concessions as help that reduces the buyer's total purchase costs, such as money toward repairs, closing costs, or rate buydowns. Redfin specifically says this does not include simple list price reductions or negotiated price drops, which is why concessions and price cuts should be treated as completely separate tools, but oftentimes we're not because we just race to that net. 18.8% of active listings had price cuts in June, while Denver was at 29.0% in June. Again, the highest among the 50 largest metros. Also, reported Denver's median list price at 589,000 was down 3.4% year over year. Now, does this mean that your home value is crashing or anything of that nature? Absolutely not. Like averages are, obviously thrown off a ton by outliers and so on. So we can't necessarily say that Denver home prices are down 3.4%. And if this continues to go 5 and 10%, it's just not likely with the situation we're in. Nationally, buyers are getting more tools. Locally, Denver buyers may have even more room to structure the deal, but only on the right homes. Denver's concession share is higher than the national number. Denver's price cut share is higher than the national number, but Denver's inventory is simply not exploding across the board. So this is not a blanket go lowball everything market. This is a targeted opportunity. You have to know which homes have leverage and which homes do not. So how do we figure that out? Let's talk about the cleanest takeaways, right? The main takeaway is Denver buyers do not just have more listings to look at. They have more ways to structure a better deal, lower that monthly payment, help appeal to that budget. But that leverage is not evenly spread across every home. The opportunity is concentrated in homes with friction. What does a home with friction mean on the market? Maybe it's dated. Maybe it's not turnkey. Maybe it does have deferred maintenance, right? Maybe we do need that cash that we're saving to replace that 45-year-old avocado green furnace. Attached homes with HOA concerns, homes sitting past the first weekend is a huge opportunity. The overpricing of listings, which I've talked about, higher inventory price bands, like, when there's more listings going on in a specific neighborhood, on a specific street, homes where the seller has already shown some flexibility. The best homes are still performing. The problem homes are where the strategy matters. And I want to kind of point that out, and let's dive into that problem homes. Just because a home's been sitting on the market because they overpriced it does not mean there's anything wrong with it. It's just overpriced, right? The price will sell the home. If it gets low enough, people will buy it. Where the opportunity is actually showing up is in dated homes. This is one of the clearest opportunity zones. I'm talking about original kitchens, older bathrooms, tired flooring, dark interiors, weak listing presentations, homes that need cosmetic updating, homes where the seller wants a premium price for a non-premium condition. Buyers are not willing to pay top dollar and then immediately renovate unless they're getting a smoking deal. And most of the time, we're not putting the homes on the market in a smoking deal situation. That does not mean dated homes are bad. It means dated homes need to be priced and structured correctly. It also doesn't mean that a dated home in a top tier neighborhood is going to, completely crash the market. And so buyers are not paying premium prices for 2004 finishes with 2021 seller expectations. Granite tile counters had a good run. We can thank them for their service and move on. Carpet in the bathroom, great run. Let's move on. And hopefully you do it before I move in. Okay, let's talk about deferred maintenance. This is where the inspection strategy matters. So at inspection, we need to be very cognizant of what we are offering or what are we asking as a buyer, right? How old's the roof? What's the current condition? What's the HVAC age? Sewer line issues, electrical concerns, older windows, drainage or grading issues, water intrusion, foundation concerns, water heater age, plumbing issues. Those are the kind of things that we should be really focused on, among others, major health and safety issues. But a lot of times we focus so much on this inspection opportunity that we come in and we say, okay, we need to, let's get them to paint the whole house, or let's get them to do all these things. First and foremost, if you saw what you saw when you made the offer, I like to educate my buyers to be like, okay, this is the house, is what it is. Yes. Do we notice an older furnace? Maybe. But do we know if it's in safe working order at the time of inspection? Not unless it's off and the air conditioner's off and, it's 105 degrees in the house. But other than that, like when we dive into these inspection issues, if there is something that wasn't immediately noticeable, non-cosmetic, then we can really focus in on building a strategy around that. The strategy is not just asking for money back because the house is ugly. The strategy is tying the ask to real cost, real risk, inspection findings, or the buyer's cash exposure. And ultimately, sometimes almost every inspection says that water heaters are outside of their, manufacturing lifespan. It's like 5 to 7 years, and I can raise my hand right now and tell you I've lived in a house with much older water heaters, right? If it's working safely and in good condition, maybe that note on the inspection report is just a note for the buyers to say, "Hey, this is an item that you can budget for." Will the seller replace it? Depends on how desperate they are. We can always ask, we can always negotiate, and then we can go from there. And, maybe that's an opportunity to say, okay, we have a 7-year-old water heater. We know that's coming up, but my brother's a, licensed plumber and he can put one in. But let's see if they'll give us $1,000 towards that new water heater when it goes out. Because when we talk about this and when I talk to sellers, like, look, like this buyer is coming in at a much higher interest rate, at a much higher value, or whatever that looks like, and showing the buyer what that monthly payment is, the buyer is, or the seller, what that monthly payment is going to be for that new buyer that is probably just like them when they moved in, really starts to make them realize that some of these items, while maybe working, while maybe super old and outdated, could be something that could crash a budget of a buyer. And so all that matters. That is where the inspection credits, the repair credits, and the seller paid closing costs can become powerful. And I want to speak to this a little bit because technically, if there's a loan, we don't want to have inspection credits. However, if we say, hey, we're going to have to put a new furnace in, we just amend the seller concession and kind of streamline for that. However, if you're putting something in that says this is a major health and safety hazard into an inspection resolution, the lender might say, hey, that needs to be replaced before, we lend on the property. So if it's a major health and safety concern, if it's something that would be, something that the loan or the appraiser would say, yeah, that's not going to work, then we need to make sure that we aren't just going straight to the seller concession and pulling for that credit, because we're going to have to renegotiate that later. So that's an important key, is that if it's, a major health and safety concern, like it's not working or leaving carbon monoxide or those kind of things, if that information is part of the resolution, a lender could easily say, an underwriter could say, before we do that, we need to make sure that furnace is safe and working. Just a note there. So as we kind of dive in, we can talk to attached homes with HOA concerns. This one really matters a lot locally, right? DMAR reported that DMAR reported a median of 14 days in the MLS, while attached homes had a median of 34 days. Detached homes closed at a median of 675,000, up 1.5% year over year. See, there's a positive one. While attached homes closed at a median of 391,750. Yes, by nature, most attached homes are cheaper, more of an entry-level product for sure, down 2.06% year over year. DMAR specifically pointed out to deferred maintenance and rising HOA-related costs as pressure points in the attached market. So attached homes are not bad, but buyers are reading the fine print now. HOA dues matter, and they can change. Insurance costs matter, and they can change. Reserves in the HOA budget matter, because if there's no reserves and you get a hailstorm and a huge roof claim on 45 buildings, that deductible is absolutely out of this world, and they may come after you with special assessments, because special assessments are real, right? And I've seen them do it multiple ways. Sometimes they do a special assessment. Sometimes they just add on to the monthly assessment, and there's all these crazy numbers that come across $600, $700, $800 in an HOA that probably at some point was under $200 per month, right? Deferred building maintenance matters. How old's the building? What's going on? How is it kept up? Are they cleaning out the sewer lines? What's that look like? How old's the roof? So now all of a sudden in this attached market, some of this stuff matters. I mean, there was a time when the roof age didn't really matter because it was covered by the HOA, policy, the walls out policy, so to speak. But now if a claim comes across with a lot of roofs that need replaced and there's not the reserves, that deferred maintenance is going to fall in a special assessment or a monthly HOA increase. Monthly ownership costs matter more than ever. Attached homes are not automatically a problem, but buyers are no longer treating HOA dues like a background noise. That line item is getting red now, and it's getting larger and larger as we speak. So let's talk about this. The next opportunity, the first weekend still tells the truth. If a home launches and gets limited activity, seller flexibility can increase quickly. This will be a real, you know, yellow arrow, I guess, or yellow light if a home's on the market and then we start to see those quick price reductions, right? And that means that the seller is probably more motivated. And you can see those increase quick. If it's been on the market for a weekend, maybe not a lot of action. You called the agent, how's the open house, and so on. The agent says, oh, not much. Well, they might not act as quickly. They may not be as motivated, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't mean that you can't just, go in and say, okay, this is what the data says. This is what we're going to offer. It doesn't mean that the home's bad. It means the market didn't immediately validate the price, condition, or presentation. So as a buyer, watch for homes 7 to 14 days on market, track those price reductions, but don't wait for them. If it's sticking out like a sore thumb as far as the other homes sold in the complex or in the neighborhood, similar square footage and bedrooms and so on, maybe start to do the math and see if you want to get in before those price reductions. If not, track those price reductions. What is it looking like? Are they showing a tendency to lower it every 2 weeks on the Monday after? Okay, because it's my thought that if you don't get an offer and you lower it on Monday and then you wait 2 weeks, you don't get an offer on that weekend, you lower it on Monday. Well, why are we waiting to Monday to see what they lower it to and bring more people in? Why don't we make an offer whenever we see it, notice a trend for a little bit lower and see if they're over it and want to take it? Watch for homes that had traffic but no offer. That's typically a sign of something going on. Not bad about the house, more so of an opportunity for you. Ask for terms before the seller publicly cuts again. Pair a clean offer with a strategic seller credit request. That's absolutely massive. I tell all my buyers, hey, I think we can get this for $15,000 off. Why don't you call the lender and say, what would a $15,000 credit today get us in today's, mortgage market? They'll say, well, you probably $10,000 in closing costs, prepaids. We could put $5,000 towards the rate buy down. It's going to buy down your rate an eighth or, a quarter or whatever that is. So days on market are not automatically a red flag, but they're a signal. And in this market, signals matter. So let's talk about overpriced listings. Some sellers are still pricing from memory. They remember 2021 and 2022, RIP. I get it. Those were fun years for sellers. So was being able to buy concert tickets without selling a kidney that was also fun. Times change. Overpricing creates opportunity when sellers become realistic. So the buyer strategy here is do not chase emotional pricing. Look for the price reductions. Look for homes sitting longer than competing listings. Compare condition honestly. Use data to support the ask. That's the biggest thing here is we have the data. It's out there somewhere. Structure the offer in a way that solves the seller's problem and the buyer's problem at the same time. Does a seller sitting on the market for 30 more days before they lower $10,000 more make much sense? No, because they're going to have 2 more mortgage payments due and so on. So overpricing is basically the seller volunteering to become a future price reduction statistic. And you can get that before the price reduction. The asking price, the list price is definitely not the price tag. Where buyers should not assume leverage, this is important because I do not want buyers hearing this and thinking every home is an easy negotiating target. Do not get cute on clean, updated homes, well-priced detached homes, desirable neighborhoods with limited supply, homes with a strong showing activity, homes with multiple interested buyers, homes already priced correctly for condition. Turnkey homes with newer systems and strong presentation are moving. DMAR said move-in ready homes are commanding a growing premium because buyers are prioritizing condition over potential. DMAR also said close to list price ratios held near 99%. And I'll tell you right now, the close to list price ratio is broken. So I wouldn't go there because we just talked about how many price reductions we've had, upwards of 30, 40, 50%, depending on what you're looking at. And the close to list price is just what the list price is at the time that the home went under contract, the last, marketed listing price, and it only factors in price. So if 63% of homes had seller concessions, that means that people are opting in to do exactly what I just said. If they're getting close to that last advertised price at 99%, then that doesn't take into account. You could have a full price offer with a $40,000 concession that doesn't show up in this statistic. And I want to make sure that's known. The opportunity is not walking into every listing and throwing a lowball offer. That is not negotiating. That's just making the listing agent roll their eyes and your agent, myself, hopefully, writing a bunch of offers that will never get accepted. The opportunity has to be targeted. You have to read the property. Your agent has to do the research, have conversations with the other agent, and so on. And that's what I do. I can probably call another agent and tell you the motivation, tell you, how serious they are, if, a lowball offer would be, maybe considered with data and those kind of things, as well as timelines and other things that go into the offer. You have to read the price. You have to read the days on market. You have to read the seller's position. So the buyer strategy, what to ask for and when. Now let's get practical. And this is my job. I'm just sharing it with you. There are a few different tools buyer can use. The mistake is asking for the wrong thing. Ask for seller paid closing costs when you want to preserve cash. Maybe you see an older, appliance that's going to need replaced. You never know, right? I would say, okay, yeah, the dishwasher won't close because we tripped over it when we were there. We're going to need to do dishwasher. So we're going to throw that in the concessions ahead of the inspection because we can tell that it doesn't work. When you have enough income but cash to close is tight, you're a first-time home buyer and want a better closing cushion, post-closing cushion. That's huge. You must, as a homeowner, as a new homeowner especially, understand that we don't need to get rid of all of our personal reserves because houses break, right? Moving is expensive. You are a move-up buyer juggling a sale, proceeds, movers, repairs, furniture, and reserves. This is something where concessions really come into play too, or you want to avoid draining that emergency fund as we talked about. Cash after closing matters because the house does not stop needing money once you own it. In fact, that is usually when it starts acting needy. So let's talk a little bit about the rate buy down and why this matters, right? The monthly payment is the biggest issue. This is what you have to meet 360 times over the next 30 years. The seller has room to contribute, right? Maybe they have a ton of equity. And this is where kind of my strategy for sellers, like I always like my seller's not willing to give a concession, but they're negotiable on price. What's it matter, right? If the seller gives a concession, it's not like they're giving some sort of, anything back. It just makes more sense for the buyer. All that should matter to the seller is the net to them. Yes, one thing that does come up is, real estate agent commissions are usually based on the purchase price, but you can write that into a contract. Hey, this is based on the net price, proceeds to seller. You can do that pretty easily. But other than that, there is no other savings on taking a concession and, no other savings on lowering the price, but not giving a concession. The lender confirms the numbers work. This is important because there are maximums on your concessions. So we need to make sure that the right loan for your down payment, it's anywhere between 3 and 6% typically on most loans. So we need to make sure that we have enough room to get those concessions. Sometimes the max and the lower price points, the max concession will only cover the prepaids and closing costs and that kind of stuff as it gets lower. But as the price point gets higher, like it is here, there's a little bit more room for that. You understand whether it's a temporary or permanent, right? Temporary buy downs are something completely different. You can do the temporary buy downs. I would not use a ton of, huge concessions to go towards temporary buy downs right now, because the truth is the date, the rate, marry the mortgage thing that a lot of people said, never me, unless I was talking about it like this, just didn't work, right? We're still up in these higher mortgage rate kind of situations. Sometimes they do work, but as a buyer, if your lender is talking about temporary buy downs, make sure you boldly understand what's going on there, because what happens is you buy it down 3, 2, 1, right? You buy it down 3% the first year, 2% the next year, 1% the next year, and then you go to that market rate. That's a huge increase in your monthly payment. And sometimes when the rate doesn't go down or it's higher when you're looking to refinance, it's a problem. You're not using a temporary buy down to lie to yourself about the long-term affordability. Your mortgage your rate is your rate, and it's going to eventually show up down the line. A buy down can be a smart tool, but it is not magic. You need to understand what the payment becomes later, and that obviously permanent buy down is going to have you just have to focus on the taxes and insurance increases, where a temporary buy down, you add that third variable of the raising interest rate. So inspections, right? Always have inspections. Never waive your right to inspect. In certain situations, maybe waiving your right to object is something that could be used still in this market with multiple offers. However, I'm not seeing that a ton like I was. Inspection finds real issues. You want control over who does the work after closing, right? That allows some of that stuff to come in. That's why I would never say, hey, can you repaint the house? Well, the seller is going to pick the color. They're going to pick the cheapest color, the cheapest painter, and the work might not be done as you would expect. So something like that, maybe build a credit in on the front end. You saw the chipping paint, you saw the disaster that it was when you walked in. Kind of work that into a concession on the front end versus at the inspection because you could see it. The seller does not want to manage repairs before closing. This is something that's kind of there, but again, major health and safety stuff, things that will cause an underwriter or an appraiser to say, yep, this is subject to that being replaced. You definitely want to be careful there. The issue is real, but not necessarily a deal killer. You'd rather receive a credit than trust a rush seller to get the cheapest repair with the cheapest supplies. There are specific concerns like roof, sewer, furnace, air conditioning, water heater, electrical, plumbing, windows, drainage, and safety issues. The stronger your documentation, the stronger your ask. That's why working with an inspector, likely, suggested by your real estate agent, is absolutely massive. When you do want to ask for a price reduction over a concession, when the home is clearly overpriced, the appraisal support is questionable, right? Because if you have a $30,000 seller concession on a $500,000 home, the home still has to appraise at $500,000 for you to get that loan. So it's better to understand, like, okay, this is why you get comps from me every time that we put an offer in. Hey, these are the comps. This is where it is. This is where I think it could appraise. So yeah, it could appraise at $700,000. So I think the $30,000 concession, it'll be taken into account, but I still see that an appraiser can say, yes, this home is worth $700,000. Seller concessions do not solve the buyer's biggest concern. You care more about the long-term payment than preserving cash. That's when this definitely matters, right? The seller needs to reset expectations. All of those things are things that you can maybe opt in to a price reduction over a seller concession. The question is not just, can I get the seller to come down? The better question is, which negotiation tool puts me in the strongest position after closing? And that's the key. So if you're looking at homes and you're trying to decide whether to ask for a price reduction, closing costs, inspection credit, repair credit, or rate buy down, reach out before you hire an agent and let's have a conversation about it. And I can tell you my strategies, because this is where the strategy matters. The wrong structure can leave real money on the table, and the right structure can help you buy a home, preserve cash, protect your monthly payment, and avoid walking into your first year of home ownership financially exhausted. So there's so many opportunities here, whether you're a move-up buyer, whether you're an investor. In every situation, as I always say, is extremely different, okay? A seller credit can sharpen a good deal. It does not rescue a bad one. Do not use concessions to ignore bad rent numbers. Do not use temporary buy downs to pretend long-term payments work. This is where the investor side comes into it. If you love talking about cash flow as an investor, then we need to have a conversation, because it could either bury you, or like I've gotten concessions on several of my leverage properties, which has had me bring less cash to the table, because duplexes, especially 25% down if I'm not living in them, is absolutely key here. So let's flip this over to the sellers before we finish. I want you to compete without panic, right? Let's flip this. This is not a market where every seller needs to panic, but is absolutely a market where sellers need to be honest. Buyers have more choices. Buyers are pickier. Buyers are looking harder at condition. Buyers are factoring in the cost of ownership immediately. That means sellers need to compete on preparation, pricing, and terms. So price it correctly from day one. Do not list high just to test the market. Fix the obvious maintenance issues before you go live, Get ahead of roof, sewer, HVAC, electrical, windows, structural, all of that. Understand HOA and what's your situation there. Prepare the home like buyers have options because they do. Decide up front whether seller credits are part of maybe your pricing strategy, but don't, draw a line in the sand and say absolutely no seller credits, because honestly, at the end of the day, all that matters is net to you. DMAR said well-kept homes are still trading briskly and maintaining price integrity, while homes that sit give buyers more time to do their homework. DMAR also noted buyers are factoring in the cumulative cost of ownership over 5 to 10 years and building that into offers. For the sellers, this is not a market where sellers need to panic, but it is a market where sellers need to stop pretending condition does not matter. The worst seller strategy right now is overprice, underprepare, sit for weeks, then act offended when the buyer asks for a credit. That's not the strategy. That's just donating time to Zillow. So as we go, we can definitely focus in on this. There's a lot of, things that are going out there. There's a lot of things that people aren't really understanding. But the honest truth is we have to have an experienced person to talk to about this. If you're a buyer, you want somebody that understands negotiation, understands the loan process and the maximums on seller concessions, or has a really good, relationship with the lender that they can pick up the phone at 6 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon and just say, hey, what's the max we can get for this? Right? Because the loan caps apply. And we need to be upfront about that, because the honest truth is if we negotiate a too big of a concession into an offer, that money typically goes back to the seller when it goes down. So that's absolutely massive. So this part matters. And just one disclaimer, and then we can get out of here. Seller concessions are useful, but they're not magic. Loan programs cap. Conventional FHA, VA, and investment loans all have their different rules. Concessions usually cannot be used toward the down payment, which I mentioned earlier. Appraisals still matter. Lender approval still matters. Excessive concessions can create underwriting problems, as well as, go back to the seller. A seller credit doesn't make an unaffordable home affordable. A temporary buy down does not erase the long-term payment that you're agreeing to. Buyers need to compare price reduction versus seller credits with their lender before making an offer. A concession is not the seller handing you a gift card at closing. Is part of the financing structure, and the lender, appraiser, and loan programs all get a vote. So as we finish out, here's the bottom line. The opportunity right now is not about guessing to the bottom. It is about reading the market in front of you. Nationally, seller concessions are elevated. Denver concessions share is higher than the national number. Denver price cut share is also higher than the national number. But the opportunity is not evenly spread across every home. The opportunity is strongest where the home has friction. As we talked about, the best buyers right now are not just asking, can I get a lower price? They're asking, how can we structure this overall deal? And if you want help structuring your deal, planning this ahead of time so you're not dealing with this when you're going in to make offers and you're sending your lender, the million different updated documents you need, reach out 303-543-1453. And I'll see you on the next Why Invest Wednesday. I hope this one brought some light to the opportunities that may be sitting in front of you. We'll see you next time.